Welcome back, boys and girls. So now we're going to look at a new poetic device that we call parallel structure and how it applies to our poem that we read today. So a parallel structure is a poetic device, and this occurs when the same form is repeated in series of lines of stanzas. So this was evident in our poem that we read today. So we're going to look at some of these lines and the pairs and try to observe and realize how they resemble each other. So if you look at stanza line 1 and stanza 2 line 1, it says, when I was a young child, and stanza 2 line 1 says, when I was a young child. And these lines are what? They are precisely parallel, which means they are the same. They both say when I was a young child, right? Now we're going to look at a new pair. It's stanza 1, line 2, and stanza 2, line 2. It says in Lynchburg, Virginia, and then also it says moving to Montclair, New Jersey, right? These lines are similar. They both name a city and a state where the author lived, right? So she lived in Virginia, and she also lived in New Jersey. Then if you look at stanza 1, line 3, and stanza 2, line 3, it says, I could not ride thee. And she said, I can now ride thee. So they are almost the same, but they have one letter, which is now in the first and the second in stanza 2 and not in stanza 1, that are different. And this small change in the terms of letters, but it represents a big change in the terms of meaning. So that means, although it's just a few like now and not are very similar, it means it changes a lot of meaning. The not saying something is not and saying something is now is totally different. So the big change, it's a small change far as letters, but a huge change terms of meaning, right? Okay, stanza 1, line 4 says trolley car sitting next. And stanza 2, line 4 says trolley car sitting next. And again, these lines are the same. They are precisely parallel, which means they're exactly the same. They mean the same thing. And then stanza 1, line 5, to our white neighbor, and stanza 2, line 5, to our white neighbor. These lines are also the same, and they are parallel and exactly the same. Okay? So now we're going to look at the questions here. So our first question is, what effect does this parallel structure have on the way you think about these two scenes? So what do you think, how does this affect, how do these common and these repetition of words and parallel structure, how does that make you feel about these two scenes? And then I also want you to take the time and think about, I want you to offer a statement about what happens in stanza 1. So what do you think in your own words? What happens in stanza 1? I want you to think about this. And then also offer a statement about what happens in stanza 2. So what do you think happens in stanza 2? I want you to think about that and write it down in your writing journal. Answer these questions and think about it. Remember, these are comprehension and reading comprehension, because we're thinking about what we're reading in our poems, and they're not just words, they're words that have meaning. Okay? So now we're going to look at activity 10.1. Okay, for number 1, it says, how does the description of Virginia resemble the description of New Jersey? So let's look at that. How do these two compare and resemble each other? Okay, looking at the poem, we see that both in Virginia and in New Jersey, they both They sat on a trolley car. So that's one similar thing. And then what do they both have what? To our white neighbor. So they both have a white neighbor. So for number 1, we would type, they both states include a trolley car, and both have a white neighbor. Okay, so we're going to stop right here and come back and finish 1, 2, 3 together, okay?